All right, let's do this. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, and welcome to ioRadio with your host, Adam Smith. Today, I guess I am a glutton for punishment. I am going to do a reaction to another video that has popped up in the cryptosphere relating to the strategic Bitcoin reserve, this notion that the United States is going to start stockpiling crypto, and this is supposed to be good for somebody somewhere, the country, etc. And there's not enough dialogue really happening about what the value of this is, or really on either side. There's just mention that it's going to be created, right? But there's not a lot of discussion as to what that means and why people really want it, other than a few select buzzwords. So I found this video where Michael Saylor is at this Bitcoin for America conference, and he talks about the importance of the strategic Bitcoin reserve. So before we really can criticize the notion, we really need to understand where these people are coming from when they're trying to argue that a strategic Bitcoin reserve makes sense, right? So let's hear what they have to say. And there is nobody more capable of mounting an argument than Michael Saylor, who is considered by many to be Bitcoin Jesus. He's the chief evangelist for Bitcoin, and he has taken his company MicroStrategy and he's leveraged it up to the hilt as a kind of a pseudo ETF for Bitcoin. He's bought massive amounts of it. His company is super overvalued. So he is way, way deep into this. And suffice to say, he has a lot of material interest in promoting this. But what are his arguments? Obviously, he needs other people to buy into this in order for it to work. So let's hear what Michael Saylor's argument is to America as to why Bitcoin is it and why a strategic Bitcoin reserve makes sense. What's interesting about this, I've kind of skimmed through it, is that we get some insight into how Michael has reacted to certain previous crypto talking points not coming true, like the notion that Bitcoin was going to replace fiat as a currency. So he's pivoted and he has fabricated some additional new narratives that I think are interesting and that we want to talk about. Also, this video is going to be basically a great example of fallacies, logical fallacies, and misleading statements. So I'm going to be talking a lot about how people use language to mislead other people, specifically through the use of what are called logical fallacies, where you say something that has an untruth within it or some kind of misleading or fraudulent premise, and you try to sneak it by people so they're not paying attention. So if you turn this into a drinking game regarding logical fallacies, you're going to probably get alcohol poisoning pretty quickly. So I wouldn't advise that, but buckle in and let's watch this, shall we?
I'm delighted to have the opportunity to speak today. The word strategic Bitcoin reserve to the casual observer sound like a stockpile of an asset. To a closer observer, it sounds like a stockpile of the most valuable asset the human race has ever invented.
Okay, so right off the bat, the second sentence that he says is a great example of what's called begging the question. Begging the question is a logical fallacy where in the process of making a statement, you create an assumption that has not been proven and you do not prove it. You just throw it out there as if it's a foregone conclusion, which, quote, begs the question, is that argument really true? So let's go back. I hate to do this to literally the first 20 seconds, but I think we need to. So let's go back and hear what he says.
The word strategic Bitcoin reserve to the casual observer sound like a stockpile of an asset.
And that's what a typical strategic reserve is, right? Usually that asset has strategic value, like oil. Listen to this next sentence.
To a closer observer, it sounds like a stockpile of the most valuable asset the human race has ever invented.
So his question he's begging is, what evidence do you have that it's the most valuable asset that the human race has ever invented? He has not explained that. Is he going to explain that? Or is that the logical fallacy that he just introduces and then he continues from there?
But I'm here today to show you how the Strategic Bitcoin Reserve represents a strategy for United States digital supremacy in the 21st century.
Okay, so he's not going... He left that begging the question. He begged that question all over the place. So that's fallacy number one, that it's, that he has put out there. Let's see what else he's going to do.
The president, with his vision, has established a strategic Bitcoin reserve as of last week and has declared that America will be the Bitcoin superpower. That is prescient. I would hazard...
That is prescient? Yeah, okay, maybe.
...hazard to guess that the great majority of the people that saw that post don't even know what Bitcoin superpower means.
Neither
do I. And they haven't really considered it. I was inspired by the words, and that caused me to...
And his personal material interests.
...put together this presentation today. Why is Bitcoin critical to the prosperity of the United States in the 21st century?
Okay, begging the question number two. Why is it critical to the prosperity? He's basically put a premise in there that it is critical. So he's going to explain why. Let's see.
That is the question we all should be asking. There are many metaphors for thinking about a strategic reserve of Bitcoin. Bitcoin is digital capital. If we thought of it...
Another begging the question. He's just declaring, it's what's called an unstated major premise fallacy. Really, a lot of these logical fallacies are interrelated to each other, but an unstated major premise is just when you make a claim and then you don't provide any details for why.
Is Bitcoin is digital capital. Is this a stockpile of cheese? Is this a stockpile of oil, natural gas, or even uranium, all of which would be interesting?
Not necessarily simply interesting, Michael, but of strategic material importance. We can explain why we need uranium. We need uranium for very specific things. Even cheese feeds people. It has intrinsic value. So explain to us where Bitcoin provides some actual utility to the country.
Well, at its worst case, in its narrowest form, you could think about the Strategic Bitcoin Reserve as a stockpile of the apex asset of the human race. And
okay. Begging the question number two. Now it's the apex asset of the human race. This another claim he has made that's just out of thin air. Does he justify why it's the apex asset, or does he just continue on with begging that question?
So what's it worth? Well, over the next 20 years, I think it's worth anywhere from $3 trillion to $106 trillion to the United States.
So he thinks it has value, but he's not answered the question, though.
U.S. corporations, like my corporation, are actually recapitalizing on Bitcoin. We've gone from having $250 million of assets 48 months ago to having nearly $45 billion of assets in 48 months. If you look out over the next 20
These assets that he's referring to are simply the value of the Bitcoin holdings that MicroStrategy has. And his valuation is based on an incredibly absurd premise that if he were to sell those assets at market value, it would not affect the price. Now, this guy owns a significant percentage of crypto, and we can prove with evidence that trading certain volumes of crypto, selling certain volumes, will affect the price and make it go downwards. Significantly less amounts of crypto than what MicroStrategy has. So this idea that it's just like Elon Musk. If Elon Musk is a principal shareholder in Tesla, and Tesla is valued at this much, and he actually tried to sell half of his holdings, it would probably tank the value of Tesla significantly. Bitcoin is even more fragile than that. So the notion that valuing his holdings at market value, assuming that market value would not change if he sold, is very misleading.
Years, corporations that are accumulating Bitcoin on their reserve, like MSTR, like Mera, like Riot. They're going to have 20 to 40 trillion dollars. So this is a small metaphor, but it's a powerful metaphor. But, you know, it's hard to rent out, finance, or develop your cheese or your gold or your natural gas buried in a vault. So a more powerful metaphor.
Again, cheese and natural gas and gold have intrinsic value and are used to produce products and services that society needs and uses every single day. What does Bitcoin offer strategically? If all the gold disappeared tomorrow, or all the natural gas, or all the cheese disappeared tomorrow, it would affect our daily lives. You know, we have all of our electronic instruments use gold for the contacts and things like that. And people love cheese, and cheese is used everywhere, and natural gas is too. If all the Bitcoin disappeared tomorrow, would anybody even notice? How is that strategically important to us?
Bitcoin is digital property. If you own 5% of Manhattan and your family owned it for 100 years and someone said, how are you going to pay your bills? You wouldn't say, we're just going to sell it. You would say, we're going to rent it. We're going to develop it. We're going to put a building on top of it, a business on top of it, or we're going to finance it. We're going to borrow against it.
Interesting. So he's now claiming that Bitcoin is digital property. He's comparing Bitcoin to an actual asset that does have intrinsic value, which is physical property. And you can create value from property. You can rent it out. You can use it as collateral. But the reason why it's used as collateral is because it can create value. Is he going to actually argue that you could do the same thing with an intangible digital token?
The same is true with Bitcoin. In 20 years, the United States could be generating $10 trillion per year by renting, developing, or financing the assets in that strategic Bitcoin reserve.
So this is very, very interesting. He is now arguing that Bitcoin is not money, but it's just abstract value, and it's so valuable that you could borrow against it. Just let that sink in. That his collection of Pokemon pictures stored on his computer is going to do nothing but get bigger and bigger and bigger over time, even though you can't actually play Pokemon with it because it's just a collection of pictures and it doesn't even have card dynamics on it or whatever. But that's it. The Bitcoin is just going to be more and more and more valuable because of what? That's the premise they're just shoving into people's heads. But does it make sense?
The AIs are coming. The AIs don't get bank accounts. They don't get credit cards. The AIs, the artificial intelligence economy, will be built on digital capital, digital property. It'll be a $100 trillion economy.
So how does AI need Bitcoin? Again, that doesn't make sense to me.
It'll be built on Bitcoin.
How? So another begging the question fallacy there. Let's see how he tries to, spin this one.
Well, a lot of people, they think of it as an asset. You think of it as a property, but what we know to be true is that Bitcoin is actually a network, and it's not just any network. It's not an information network. It's an energy network.
So there's another begging the question, an unstated major premise.
Conservative network. I can send $1 billion from me to you. I lose it. You have it.
Now that's an absolutely false statement. If you send somebody Bitcoin, you're not sending them dollars. You're sending them Bitcoin. So right off the bat, that's just completely false.
That is the conservation of energy in cyberspace.
Okay, so there's one of a Saylorism where he kind of creates these weird pseudoscientific statements and attributes them to Bitcoin. Conservation of energy, digital energy.
So when you start to visualize Bitcoin as a digital energy network, what you realize is that trillions of dollars of digital commerce will flow over that network.
So it's a digital energy network. trillions of dollars in digital commerce will flow over the Bitcoin network. For what purpose? What purpose is this digital? Digital banking will rely on the Bitcoin network for security, integrity, and final settlement. Again, this has all been proven false. 1 minute he's saying that that crypto is an asset, a store of value. Now he's suddenly suggesting that the Bitcoin network is a payment method. But we know that its performance, 4.7 transactions per second, make it completely unsuitable as any kind of a settlement network for any reasonable amount of transactions.
The banking system of the world is going to rebuild itself on a digital energy network. We're going to have 40,000 banks that'll be settling with each other in real time. Finally, moving billions, tens of billions, or hundreds of billions of dollars an hour.
So I guess his premise is that Bitcoin will become like the standard measurement of value for like settlement between banks. Now, the problem with that is you have to get all of the banks to acknowledge that Bitcoin is now going to be the central measurement of value and not the US dollar. So I don't see how that makes any sense. I mean, think about NFTs. When they foisted the NFT scheme on people, they said, you could take one NFT from one game and you put it into another game. And so everybody thought, once I own an NFT, it's permanent and I can use it here and there and there. And what happened? They couldn't get anybody else to acknowledge the NFT had any meaning or purpose or utility in any other game because there was no good reason for anybody to embrace that. This is the exact same dynamic here. There is no good reason for any banks to adopt Bitcoin as some kind of a central measurement of value. He's just assuming this magically happens, which is incredibly unlikely.
Over a pure digital network. Right, so if you look at the world and imagine digital energy moving around the world, and then you ask the question, would you want to own it or would you want to ignore it? It's an important question. And of course, I think some of you might have seen the cyber blackout of X yesterday and all the cyber attacks. The last and most important metaphor is when we have open digital energy flowing,
open digital energy flowing, all of these bizarre abstract concepts. You notice he never really talks about specifics in a practical real world use case.
It is a commerce network. But when we reverse that digital energy into a shield, it becomes a defense system. Bitcoin's a digital defense system. Bitcoin messages, data authentications, transactions, they're unstoppable, uncorruptible, immutable, immune to tampering by any known cyber threat.
This is totally disingenuous, completely misleading and disingenuous. When he refers to Bitcoin's security, he is only referring to one particular scenario, one particular type of security in the Bitcoin network that is relatively solid as of now, and that is cracking the encryption that Bitcoin uses. That's what he considers to be completely unstoppable and incorruptible. But everywhere around other places in the network, it is completely stoppable, corruptible, and susceptible to tampering. Let me give you an example. I can block all Bitcoin activity on my network by simply blocking port 8833. I think that's the port that Bitcoin uses. Anybody that runs any network at any level, and a corporation can stop all Bitcoin traffic on their network with one simple command in the router. A nation like China, if they send a dictate to their top-level ISPs, block this port, that's it. All the Bitcoin network ceases to function on that entire network. Now, Michael's not talking about these other points of vulnerability. He's only talking about you can't come in the front door of this vault that is 85,000 feet thick. He is not He's not saying anything about all the windows, some of which are unlocked, some of which are actually open around the side of this building. And so it's incredibly disingenuous. The Bitcoin network can easily be stopped, absolutely, on a technological level, by just simply refusing to handle traffic for Bitcoin's nodes. So if you run a node on the Bitcoin network, since nobody's in charge of it, there's no authority that says, here's who is a good actor and here's who is a bad actor. So everybody has to listen for everybody and deal with everybody. Well, you could set up a node that gets onto the network and listens for where the other nodes are. Now, you may not be able to decrypt all their traffic, but you know that they are Bitcoin nodes and you know that they're Bitcoin miners. So you know their IP address and you can block them. And it's trivially easy for nation states that simply decide they don't want to have anything to do with Bitcoin to block the Bitcoin network. Is there a way of maybe working around it by using different ports and obfuscating the Bitcoin traffic? Sure. But the whole point of the Bitcoin network is that it's public. So it has to be able to identify itself to other nodes or it breaks down. So all you have to do is create a node that infiltrates the network that feeds you the information as to what port they're using and all of that, and you can completely stop it. It's trivially easy. And that's just one of dozens of different ways that the Bitcoin network can be corrupted. Browser extensions, you click on the wrong thing, phishing attacks, all the on and off ramps where you try to buy crypto or sell crypto, those all can be corrupted and the transactions can be stopped and things can be seized. There's so many different ways. When he makes this suggestion that it's like rock solid and nobody can tamper with it, he is lying. He is lying, and he's fabricating what we call a nirvana fallacy, where he assumes that that nobody will notice the windows and the cracked doors around back, and they will only pay attention to this one door in the front, and that's the only way that you can mess with the network. It's very, very disingenuous.
You can protect the United States commercial and military and financial systems behind a wall of digital energy.
Yeah, just don't look around the sides.
And that's exactly how we will do it. Even Elon Musk pointed out, the AIs don't know how to hack Bitcoin. They can spoof you out of your money. They can convince you that there's someone they're not. There's no way to...
Yeah, and of course, doing that, they get all your crypto.
Trick an 800 exahash digital wall that's based on modern encryption. The AIs won't get through that.
Actually, there's no guarantee that that's true either. But once again, he's talking about anybody who wants to mess with crypto is going to go in through the front door. Let's not talk about all the other angles.
What's driving the growth of Bitcoin? It is the most powerful force in the world right now. It's growing.
Another unstated major premise, the most powerful force in the world. And he's got it here compared to actual useful companies and assets that do things, right? Gold has material utility. Apple creates products that have material utility. Microsoft does. NVIDIA, Google does. Valuable services. Amazon as well. And here's Bitcoin with this market cap, which is absurd. But it doesn't produce anything useful. If any of these other things disappeared, it would affect your daily life. If Bitcoin disappeared, would anybody even really notice? Most people wouldn't.
Nearly 60%. It's become the eighth largest asset in the world. It's about to become the largest asset in the world in the next 48 months. What is it? It's all of the smart money in the world running from risk, running from the past toward future, from something less secure to something more secure.
Again, not only simply unstated major premises, just arguments with no evidence, but almost a kind of an intimidation. You know what I mean? Like, this is smart money. You're not smart if you are not buying into his scheme.
And they're doing it in the most visible way with their capital.
Now, I call that, crypto gaslighting, right? If you're smart, you'll be buying crypto.
This is a map of the wealth distribution in the world, about $900 trillion. If you break it into uses, half of it is just a store of value. We're long-term, we're preserving our capital for the long term. We just want to keep our money. The other half are assets held for utility. I want to do something with the asset. If you drill into the 450 trillion, you realize the problem is that long-term capital is being dissipated and decimated by fires, by floods, by famines, by tariffs, by wars, by competition, by rust, by obsolescence.
So these are all the little factors that eat away at the value of the dollar, the value of your holdings, right? But many of these things are necessary in order to produce very important things that you need. All these taxes, capital gains and VAT, these are all the lion's share of probably what most people complain about. Paying taxes produces very useful things that you need: roads and bridges, running water, electricity, schools, parks. So maybe while your money is shrinking, also notice that you've got roads and bridges and flood protection and fire departments and stuff like that. That money is not just disappearing for nothing. It's producing things that you absolutely need. And if you think it's a waste of taxpayer dollars, think about how much 1 foot of interstate costs, and then add up all the taxes you've paid your entire life and realize that you probably have not paid enough to produce 1 foot of interstate. And you drive on that almost every day. And that's kind of, the detachment that these people have.
By torts, by traffic, you name it, right? What's that cost? That costs $10 trillion a year.
Again, he also mentions things here that eat away at value: weather, catastrophes, obsolescence, incompetence, legal efforts, war. How is crypto immune from being affected by all these things? It isn't. So, again, this just seems like a rather weird distraction.
There's people go, well, what is Bitcoin's use case? The use case is to not suffer $10 trillion a year of damage from entropy, from inflation, from chaos, from the...
So Bitcoin's use case is that it supposedly is a hedge against daily things that happen in life. Again, that's another begging the question that begs the question, how? How is it a hedge?
Future. Bitcoin's an asset without the financial risk of a currency, a bond, a stock, and it doesn't have the physical risk of real estate and property. And we're stripping away the counterparty risk to everything. And so we're...
and that's all. All this is false. All these statements that he's making, many of which are in my crypto talking points, like about it doesn't have any counterparty risk. It absolutely does.
We're moving away from risk, and what that means is that as the word spreads that there's an opportunity to keep your money without taking risk, long-term capital.
There's an opportunity to keep your money without taking risk. So now he's implying that Bitcoin is risk-free. And, you can go on the news and you'll see people losing money in crypto each and every day. So there's risk there for sure.
Is being merged into the Bitcoin network. The greatest digital transformation of the 21st century, it isn't the transformation of music, it isn't the transformation of your photos, your communications, your Facebook friends, or educational videos, although each of those things made a $1 trillion company. The greatest digital transformation is the transformation of capital. So it's the transformation of 450 trillion. What's it worth? It's worth half of everything.
Another unstated major premise. He's just declaring that Bitcoin is everything. It's digital capital.
It's half of everything. That's the transformation. Digital capital is stronger, faster, and smarter capital. It's everything you don't like about the building stripped away, and you've got an invisible, indestructible, immortal, teleportable building.
Again, completely absurd. the fact that this guy is making a presentation in which he's got at least government people there, that's Cynthia Loomis, I think, to his left. She's from Wyoming, if I'm not mistaken, and she's a big Bitcoin shill too. This is just absurd that somebody is making this claim and that there's not laughter in the room. But of course, all these people want everybody to believe this bullshit so they can sell their bags and dump them on you.
A better building. It's global capital. It's everybody that's living in Asia and Africa and South America would move to the U.S. if they could. They'd move their money to the U.S. if they could.
I don't think so
they
now.
They want the currency of the U.S. They want the property of the U.S. They want the security of the U.S. They want the values of the U.S.
The values.
But they can't have it. So the second best thing they can have is move their money into the Bitcoin network, which has all of the values, protections, and securities of the U.S. Bitcoin is immortal capital.
Bitcoin is immortal. I mean, you notice all of these weird reinterpretations of traditional words now being applied to Bitcoin. It's just crazy.
Right? You can keep your money for 1,000 years. A 10 basis point fee works out to a useful lifetime of 1,000 years. All the other long-term capital assets have a life of 10 to 100 years.
Again, now this notion that he thinks Bitcoin is going to be around in 1,000 years is just a fantasy. Even really, really useful things that we have, we can't guarantee they'll be around in 1,000 years. Like honey and bees. We have no idea if there'll be bees in another 100 years, much less 1,000. And Bitcoin requires all kinds of resources just to exist and doesn't produce anything useful. At least bees make honey and pollinate plants.
Find a business you want to invest in that'll be around for 500 years. Find a building that will last for 500 years. Find a bond that will pay off in 500 years.
So it's interesting. A building may not last, but a building full of computers that maintain Bitcoin, that will last. That doesn't make sense.
Find a piece of art that'll still be legible in 500 years. And finally, what we all know in this room is that Bitcoin is, and digital capital is ethical capital. It's
another incredibly crazy, fallacious claim. The only thing in this world you can truly own, which is absolutely absurd, because the only way to prove that you have ownership of Bitcoin is, number one, to get somebody else to agree that they give a shit about it, which good luck with that with most people. And number two, you need this elaborate network of computers and internet access and software to even pull up whatever web page or thing you need to do that says you own something. And if any of that network goes down, you don't have anything. You have nothing. So how is that truly... how does that remove counterparty risk when you need this whole network to be constantly operating in order to even be able to prove you own it?
It's the only thing in this world you can truly own. If you have possession of the keys, if you have possession of the knowledge of where the keys might be, you own the thing. No one can take the thing away from you.
Again, that's absolutely false. I have an entire section in my documentary that shows there's numerous ways people can take crypto away from you.
Everything else you have in this world you own at the pleasure of someone more powerful than you until they decide to take it away from you. Satoshi gave us property rights, sound money, sovereign money. It's a network, but what is it? It's the world's most powerful network. 800 exahash. What's the measure of digital power? It's exahash. 20 gigawatts, all the electricity, all the power that fires up the US Navy. It's also got the most economic power. My company spent $33 billion to buy 2.4% of the network. Do the math in your head, you'll realize there's $1 trillion of real money that has flowed into this network, and there's $1 trillion of smart money behind it. It's the world's most global, fault-tolerant, unstoppable network. Each of those ASIC chips is hundreds of thousands of laptop computers. You'd need trillions and trillions of computers to dent this network. And then, of course, many people say, oh, I get it, it's a network effect. It must be a network. Yeah. Well, it's not a Metcalfian network. That's just enough information about networks to hurt yourself. It's not.
This is just fucking so crazy. All of these weird, he's just, big, he's just throwing numbers up on the screen that seem impressive. And now he's comparing crypto to celestial bodies. I mean, this guy is all over the place.
Not getting more powerful with the square of the number of nodes. It's getting more powerful based upon the amount of mass, energy, and capital flowing in the network. It's a Newtonian network.
Can you imagine if you went to like a restaurant and you wanted to order a burger and the guy goes, I don't have a burger, but I do have the most valuable asset known in human history. It's like the orange dwarf, the brightest object in the culinary system, growing stronger, hotter, and denser as it attracts capital. What? I just wanted a burger. Can you explain to me where the burger is? No. This is about digital food.
Like the solar system. When the white dwarf comes past your planet, it's going to suck the atmosphere off your planet. A white dwarf is not the same as an asteroid the same size. They're different. Bitcoin is the brightest thing in the financial universe, right? Heat and light. It's the most interesting. It's growing stronger. It's growing hotter. It's growing denser as it draws the capital of the world into its orbit. What capital? Physical capital. People are selling their buildings. Financial capital. They're going to trade out their low-grade bonds, their currencies in third world and in the second world. Foreign capital. They're going to sell their Siberian real warehouses and their Russian natural gas rights. It's drawing antiquated capital, the capital of the 20th century. It's drawing smart capital. Anybody that thought about it and thought, do I want to be invested in something that's going to decay or be destroyed over time by 100 uncertain risks, or do I want to just keep my money in cyberspace? And then digital capital. Right? The AIs, they don't get the bank account. As the economy digitizes, people want to move digital money at the speed of light with a million transactions a second. You're not doing it with a Siberian warehouse. You're not doing it with natural gas or gold. You're not going to do it with any 20th century asset.
Oh, God, that's just tedious AF. There's no way I can subject you guys to all of that meandering. I'll have to edit this.
Our assumptions, well, Bitcoin's currently 22 basis points of the global economy.
Based on an absurd market cap metric that is meaningless.
That's $2 trillion. Over 20 years, right now it's been growing about 60% a year. If it decelerates from 60% a year to 20% a year, the average return is going to be 29% a year over the 20 years.
So this is really interesting here. This is his price predictions of Bitcoin in the future. So his worst case scenario is his bear thing, and the worst case scenario suggests that every year over the next 20 years, Bitcoin will only increase 21%. And if that's the case, it'll be worth $3 million in 20 years. His middle of the road recommendation here is that Bitcoin's going to be worth $13 million in 20 years, and then optimistic projection would be 49 million. Nowhere in his projection does it say there's a possibility that it just might not go up anymore. People might get tired of the bullshit and the fact that it does nothing useful for society, and that all of his weird abstractions, digital energy network and apex money of the universe or whatever, are meaningless in the real world. And they just stop, kind of like they did with Beanie Babies, where they just got tired of being jerked around by people pretending those things were scarce when they really weren't. Where is that projection, Michael? I know when you file shit with the SEC, you have to put risks. Where's your realistic risk projections and, disclosures here to the fucking American people? This is so sad.
That is the base case. That arrives at a price of $13 million a Bitcoin in USD terms, or $280 trillion in the network. Does the world turn upside down? No. What happens? Well, everything pretty much stays the same, except for those that embrace Bitcoin get rich and powerful. Those that don't embrace Bitcoin get weaker and poorer. Otherwise, everything that you see in the world today will still be there in the world in 20 years.
More kind of weird gaslighting. You know, you're going to get poorer if you don't buy into Bitcoin, and if you buy into Bitcoin, you're going to get richer. This is like a pyramid scheme or an MLM talk, you know. Well, yeah, you don't have to buy Amway, but those that do, well, they're the ones that are going to be driving the Porsches. You're just going to be driving your little Pinto. You know, if that's what you're happy with, okay.
Bitcoin is not a threat to the dollar. The dollar is currency. Bitcoin is capital. In the modern world, there are plenty of academic economists. They will just recite ad infinitum. Well, money is a store of value, a medium of exchange, a unit of account. There's
a couple of things wrong here. This is a very interesting slide because this represents Michael Saylor pivoting from the original premise of Bitcoin, which was a peer-to-peer digital currency. That's what the actual white paper says. That's what Satoshi wrote, a digital currency. He's now admitting it's failed as a currency. But if you'll notice earlier in the presentation, he was talking about it was going to become a transaction network. Well, that transaction network is fucking currency. So he's all over the place here. So now it's no longer a currency. The dollar is the currency. Bitcoin is the capital. Bitcoin is, since it's failed as a transactional medium, it's going to be the underlying basis for which we're going to value the dollar, is where he's trying to position it. And economists would never claim that the dollar is a store of value. So he's putting words in ambiguous, anonymous generalizations that are not really backed up by any kind of real facts.
I told you. And they just haven't really thought about that past just rote memory. This is why you shouldn't rote memorize stuff in education. Think a little bit harder about what's going on here. If you need money for the next 4 weeks in Argentina, then you're using the peso. If you need money for the next 4 years in Argentina, you're using the dollar. If you need money for the next 40 years in Argentina and you're smart, you're using the Bitcoin.
Again, kind of like a weird coercive gaslight there. You're not smart if you don't use Bitcoin.
And so the dollar is competing, but is competing against the M2 money supply of the CNY, Chinese currency, European currency, Japanese currency. Right now, we're about 17% of that. We should be able to grow to 30% of that. How? With digital currency. If U.S. banks and U.S. corporations can issue digital currencies backed by the U.S. Treasury, we will expand that supply of U.S. currency by $10 trillion, right? That's a digital asset strategy. That's why the stablecoin bill and the Genius Act matter. It is not capital. Bitcoin is less than 1% of the capital of the world. What does it compete with? Not the dollar. Bitcoin competes with property.
Bitcoin competes with property. I can live in property. I can rent property out. I can't do that with Bitcoin, Michael.
Equity and bonds. Property, equity, and bonds. And what is it? It's 1%. And what is it going to? I just showed you the shocker $13 million Bitcoin forecast. That gets us to 13% of the capital in 2045. We have two strategies. Expand our currency to dominate the world with the digital currency of choice. Expand our capital to dominate the world with the digital capital of choice. Why should the U.S. want to be the Bitcoin superpower? You cannot remain a sovereign nation if you lose control of your airspace, outer space, or cyberspace. This is a truism. It's pretty important. We're not talking about making a little bit of money here. We're talking about defending the American way of life. A superpower has to keep the air routes open. You must be able to fly, not just fly from here to London. You need to be able to fly from New York to Chicago. If you look at what happened in the first Gulf War, we took control of Iraqi airspace. Within a week, their entire country was non-functioning. Some people would say within 48 hours they were non-functioning. This country won't function for 48 hours after we lose control of our airspace. How do we protect it? We have Air Force bases. We have military aircraft. This is evolving. It will continue to evolve.
It will be really interesting to see how he compares military air superiority to Bitcoin. This is going to be good.
Drones, very sophisticated defense systems. We have to keep open our sea lanes. This is a truism for 1,000 years. The Carthaginians knew it. That's why the Romans destroyed them. The Carthaginians had destroyed the Venetian fleet. Every single port in the Mediterranean that was a Venetian port was also a Roman port, was also a Carthaginian port, was also a Phoenician port. Why? Because you must keep the sea lanes open if you would be a superpower. If I cut off your sea lanes, I choked your economy. The Japanese determined this or found this out in World War II. Sea power requires naval bases operating appropriate ships. A superpower has to keep its cyber channels open. What does that mean? It means your communication channels for digital information, but it also means your communication channels for digital energy.
Digital energy. Again, if we lose control of the Bitcoin network, do we lose control of our economy?
Need to be able to move a signal, but I need to move a $10 billion chunk of money. All
right, there you go, people. All of you guys out there that need to move $10 billion really quickly, you pay attention here. This is for you.
Just need to keep the cyber channels open around the world. It's not just I want to move that information or that energy between New York and Tokyo. If I lose control of cyberspace over the United States, I can't move information between New York and Chicago.
Right? But losing control of cyberspace would mean affecting the internet. And the internet was actually designed to be resilient in this situation. It has nothing to do with Bitcoin and crypto. In fact, Bitcoin requires this base internet infrastructure to be attack proof in order for it to exist, right? So Bitcoin is a parasite on top of the existing internet network. And guess what? That's funded by tax dollars that are part of that evil fiat system that you want to bypass. That, good luck with that.
Right? You lose cyberspace, you'll lose your own digital economy. What would you do if your enemy got control of your cyberspace? You saw just, again, yesterday, you can't even log into X. Well, what happens when you can't log into your bank account? Cyber power requires Bitcoin miners operating ASICs, throwing up a wall of digital energy. And you want to hope that more than 50% of that is controlled by you or your allies. What does it mean to own cyberspace? If you want to be a Bitcoin superpower, you need to own the asset, own Bitcoin, but that's only half of it. Owning all of New York City and losing control of the sea lanes and the airspace above New York City is a Pyrrhic victory, right? You won't own it very long. It'll get shredded. You have to control the network, the cyber network, the digital energy network that flows around the world. AI is the future. The computers, the AIs, they're smarter than us. They're going to think faster than us.
Yeah, that's not necessarily true. They're not smarter than us because everything that AI knows is what we have fed it, that we as humanity know. So, and AI's ability to just rearrange what we've already learned doesn't necessarily mean that's going to be smarter. And you can spend, 30 seconds querying an AI to see that it has no actual intelligence. And I'll throw up something I asked AI to just write the word hello in a certain stylized format, and it couldn't even do that. So suggesting it's smart is kind of absurd. But then again, everything Saylor is saying is relatively absurd.
At some point, they'll be thinking 1 million times a second talking to each other, right? And if you want to build the greatest economy in the world, your cars need to drive themselves, the robots need to think, the factories need to think, and your agent needs to be thinking a million times a second about how to do something useful for you. Digital intelligence requires digital energy, which has to be secured by digital power in order to engage in digital commerce. When I say digital commerce, I don't just mean buying trinkets on Amazon. I mean moving all of the money and securing all the assets of the world. I mean 950 trillion going to 4,000 trillion dollars of assets. And it couldn't be clearer where that's headed right now. The unit of digital energy is the Satoshi. The unit of digital power is the exahash, right? What are the benefits to America of the Bitcoin strategy?
All right, let's hear it. Let's see how much vague abstractions we got here. What is the benefit? Embrace Bitcoin and own the 21st century. So you're owning the 21st century. That's a benefit. Has anybody ever come up to you and said, hey, psst, you want to own the 21st century? Well, now you know how.
Embrace Bitcoin, we own the 21st century. All the money, all the capital of the world is moving out of the 20th century. Everything that made sense, every educated financier was educated in the 20th century. They were taught a bunch of bromides, a bunch of rules. All of those rules probably made sense in the 20th century. The way we fought World War II is not the way we fight World War III. Every military doctrine, every financial doctrine, it might have been right at one point. It's not right any longer. Trillions of dollars of capital is going to flow from those physical and financial assets into digital, into the Bitcoin network. Okay, you might say, well, I'm making a strong assertion. Bitcoin is the digital capital network. I'm not just the one making that assertion. The President of the United States made that assertion last
Yeah, he did, but then 6 months prior, he said the opposite.
week. Explained by David Sachs on Friday night. He said, Bitcoin is the only crypto asset that is truly decentralized. It is special. Maybe in the future, there might be some other digital capital. The US government doesn't recognize any other digital capital, nor do we. And that's because 99% of the power.
Trump just admitted that he's going to add more other cryptos like into the strategic Bitcoin reserve other than Bitcoin.
In the crypto ecosystem is in the Bitcoin network. If you want to own cyberspace and own the future, you need to own it. Embrace Bitcoin and strengthen the dollar. We have the chance to establish, own, and control the global digital capital network.
Again, see, he's just continues to talk in these vague abstractions. Global digital capital network, whatever that means, nobody has any idea. It's just supposed to make you think that he's smart because he's using all of these weird words that you don't understand. So he must be smarter.
That is Bitcoin. We can back the US dollar with Bitcoin reserves. The only monetary asset that is competitive to the dollar. If I need a liquid fungible asset to capitalize a company or an institution, it's not real estate, it's not natural gas, it's not art, it's not private and public equity portfolios. It's not
things that you can actually use. It's Bitcoin.
Not even going to be an index of equity. The only asset that I can use other than Bitcoin is US Treasuries everywhere in the world. If anybody ever decides to replace those, they'll replace them with Bitcoin. We should own both. Embrace Bitcoin, attract foreign capital. It's not just we're getting the 20th century money, we're getting the rest of the world's money. If I gave you money, if I took all your money, I dropped you in Africa and I said, you got to invest in a diversified portfolio of private and public equity and real estate, art in Africa, or you can put your money into the digital capital network and move it anywhere else at the speed of light, and I gave you a choice to punch the orange button or leave it in Africa for 100 years, you would punch the orange button.
Yeah, you punch that orange button, and then you wake up tomorrow morning and you realize that you put the wrong address in and everything is gone.
Everybody else in the world's figuring out the same thing right now. That's why countries will make laws against it. That's why the Chinese have export controls on their capital. All of the capital will flow into the U.S. But if you can't physically come to the U.S., the next best thing is you flow into the digital capital network and you get all the protections of the U.S. And finally, you embrace Bitcoin, you empower Americans. It's American companies with Bitcoin on the balance sheet. They're going to outlast, outperform, and outlive their competitors.
There's another bold statement with no actual evidence.
It's American institutions that are holding Bitcoin. They're going to enrich their shareholders. The beneficiaries are us. And the last point, with the appropriate digital assets framework, we can become the bankers to the world, right? When we export Bitcoin to the world, we're exporting our values: sovereignty, sound money, integrity, property rights.
Sovereignty, integrity, sound money, all that. When I think of crypto, that's what I think of: integrity.
When we export digital currency, we're literally exporting our currency. If we create other digital securities or digital tokens, we'll be exporting our companies, our ideas, our securities, our financial products to the world. We can dominate this industry. So how should the U.S. pursue a Bitcoin strategy? Well, Senator Lummis has given us a clear guideline with the Bitcoin Act in Nashville in July. And what the Bitcoin Act said, it said, let's acquire 1 million Bitcoin over a 5-year period in a programmatic, disciplined fashion, transparent to all. And so let's consider the consequences of this strategy. Well, first of all, last week, the president signed...
Look at this. It starts from the digital gold rush to the perfect money era. Look at the x-axis descriptions. Oh, God, this is just so weird.
The Strategic Bitcoin Reserve Act or order. If we hold that 200,000 Bitcoin for the next 20 years, even though you see a flat line on the screen, the flat line is worth $3 trillion. So that's the value of doing nothing. Sometimes people think that you have...
The value of doing nothing. That is it, folks. That is probably the only true statement that I've actually heard him say. The real concept of Bitcoin is finding value in doing nothing. If you spend your money on this useless digital token that does nothing and you just hold it, you will get value. It's kind of like the financial version of India's caste and reincarnation system, right? Just be a good little peasant and follow these instructions, and I promise when you die, you're going to come back as a higher order, and you're going to have more money, and you're going to have more wealth. In the meantime, just hodl. It just is so kind of just creepy. Really creepy.
Have to do something to make money. Sometimes the absence of doing awful and stupid things is making money. Doing stuff is highly overrated if the stuff is trading or selling your Bitcoin.
There's a soundbite. Doing stuff is highly
overrated. The Lummis
overrated.
bill would acquire 1 million Bitcoin or 1.2 million Bitcoin. If you look at the consequences of that over the time frame, it's worth $16 trillion.
Again, this is assuming that Bitcoin hits a price of 13.4 million, which is Michael Saylor's weird little prediction that there is no evidence. What he's doing is he's extrapolating the growth of Bitcoin since its inception 16 years ago, and saying, well, if it rose X percent over this time, and we project that into the future, here's the different options. But Bitcoin's actual growth at key points, when it went from like $10 to $100, and when it went from $100 to $1,000, and every time it gets pumped, is not the result of natural organic demand. There's plenty of evidence it's a result of manipulation in the market by wash trading bots and using unsecured stable coins that are a proxy for actual fiat, like USDT and USDC, that have never been properly audited. So not only is the value and the price of Bitcoin highly suspect, but we just don't know where any of this liquidity is. It supposedly made it rise to this level, and he keeps quoting that liquidity as market cap, suggesting that this industry is super duper flush with value and liquidity when there is no actual evidence of that. That's another thing that just everything begs the question of where is this value actually located? Who's holding it? Nobody really knows.
To the nation. If you get a bit more aggressive and we go for another million Bitcoin, it's worth $34 trillion to the nation. In this case, there's a bit of reflexivity. If the United States starts to more aggressively stockpile Bitcoin, it's going to accelerate the growth of the network. It's going to accelerate capital flowing in the network. It's going to increase and expand the overall digital capital network. If we move to a triple max strategy, you'll end up with 4 million Bitcoin. That's worth $73 trillion to America.
Yeah, and if you sold a fraction of that Bitcoin, what do you think it would do to the value of Bitcoin? And where is all this liquidity that, he talks about the value going up, but where is that value going? And how easy is it to cash out? It's just, these are just magic, weird little number fantasies he's having.
And of course, President Trump has laid out a guideline. We should be the superpower. If you want a superpower strategy, here's a superpower strategy. Acquire Bitcoin consistently. By the way, over what time frame? Consistently daily between now and the 0.99. 0.99 is January of the year 2035, the point at which 99% of the Bitcoin supply has been mined. The asset becomes effectively capped for all practical purposes, because the last 1% comes out over 100 years. 0.99 between now and then you've got 10 years for the digital gold rush. You should get your Bitcoin before there's no more Bitcoin for you. And you can see here, in this strategy, we acquire it consistently, and then we use surpluses from the U.S. government to continue to save in Bitcoin. It's worth $106 trillion to the United States. And so what does that look like?
Where's he getting surpluses?
Well, the Lummis plan, which is grand, is modest in some ways, and a modest strategic Bitcoin reserve plan neutralizes the national debt.
This is completely crazy. It neutralizes the national debt, right? So let's say even if this absurd premise of the price going up was actually true, let's say in 2045, the value of your Bitcoin holdings neutralizes the national debt. You'll notice here that he's got the debt going down sometime after 2035. So apparently in 2035, the government will magically become more responsible and begin paying down the debt. But at what point, if let's say you're right here in 2045 where your holdings match the national debt, does that mean that you liquidate your holdings and you finally pay off the national debt? And are you going to be able to sell 15 trillion of Bitcoin at market value without affecting anything? I mean, it just is absurd. It's just absurd.
Sometimes doing modest things are actually brilliant, as long as you do the thing. It's like the people that bought just a little bit of Bitcoin in 2012. It was a modest investment. It made them billionaires.
A modest amount made them billionaires. I don't know of anybody that's happened to. And a modest amount in 2012 might have just been $500 worth, or $10, $20 worth. Who knows? But I don't know where he's getting that statement from.
Modest thing 20 years in advance is a brilliant thing. If you're more aggressive, the triple max plan negates the national debt. The superpower plan creates a global superpower. We bought 78% of the...
Oh my God. He is comparing buying into the strategic Bitcoin reserve with the purchase of Manhattan, the Louisiana purchase, California, and Alaska. Are you kidding? Are you kidding me? I mean, all of those assets had real intrinsic value. Oh, again, this is just absurd.
The United States for $40 million. $40 million purchased nearly 80% of this country. Think about it for a second. Bitcoin is the greatest opportunity of the 21st century, right? It's worth anywhere from $3 trillion to $106 trillion, depending upon how programmatic and aggressive we want to pursue this opportunity. These opportunities don't come along often. This is the once-in-a-century opportunity. And as Donald Trump has said,
never sell your Bitcoin, right?
And
so you had never sell your Bitcoin, but somehow just tell all of your creditors that you've got a ton of Bitcoin, and therefore they'll be so intimidated they just won't ask for you to pay your debts anymore.
I'll leave you with the final thought. What happens if we allow another nation to claim title to Bitcoin superpower? If we don't claim it, we give them control of the network. We give them all the wealth in the world. We risk being impoverished and imperiled by a hostile nation that controls all the world's digital energy. You could have clung to your glass beads when the world went to the gold standard. You could have clung to your steam engines when the world went to internal combustion. You know, you could have kept your wood-burning stoves when Rockefeller offered you petroleum. We could have dismissed nuclear power.
Oh, Bitcoin. Thank you for warming my house. Thank you for fucking making air travel possible. Thank you for all the great things that you are doing for our country, like all these other inventions did. Thank you, Bitcoin.
We once had another project. We had a Manhattan project. It was a large investment in nuclear energy. Do you want to control the world's digital energy? Because the digital economy will run on digital energy. The choice is ours, either prosperity or poverty in the 21st century. Bitcoin is manifest destiny for America.
Yeah, manifest destiny was not really all that awesome of a concept for the people that you were manifesting for your destiny, you know.
Thank you.
All right, there you have it. I apologize to anybody who actually managed to get this far into the podcast. What can I say? I feel like I need to take a shower. I mean, this was just crazy. But they got the attention of powerful people. You know, people need to get active. They need to push back against this. This is absurd. Please, you know, speak up, because this is I don't really believe that America is going to really spend any tremendous amount of money in this Bitcoin reserve. I just think that there's too many other people that have other interests that need the material value, and it doesn't serve any purpose for all of the lawmakers either, dumping capital into this black hole that will go nowhere. But they're still going to try, and the sooner we just make everybody aware of what a farce this is, the better it's going to be for everybody, and maybe they can move on to something that's a little bit less absurd. I don't know. But anyway, I want to thank everybody for tuning in, and we'll see you next time. Once again, I want to thank everybody for tuning in and listening, and be sure to subscribe to both the YouTube channel as well as our podcasts, which are on all the major platforms: iTunes, Amazon Music, Spotify. Just search for ioRadio, and you should be able to find it. Or you go to the website, ioRadio.org. You'll find links to all of the podcast platforms and everything like that. And be sure to visit the YouTube channel. It's YouTube.com/American Scream Video. You can find a link to that at our main site, which is ioRadio.org, or the site for my documentary, which is called Blockchain Innovation or Illusion. That's at blockchainii.com. And again, thanks very much for your support. And if you would like to appear on the show, or you want to debate, or you want to discuss anything, email adam@ioradio.org.